10 years after my son disappeared, I found a second candle burning beside his at the church. Same shape, same style. But I hadn't seen anyone enter. I hadn't heard a door. And tucked into the melted wax was a note partially burned, written in block letters. Just 5 words. He's alive. Stop looking. Before we start, hit subscribe to help uncover stories they tried to bury and make sure no name stays forgotten. My name's David Langley. I'm 51 now. I live in a small town just west of the Blue Ridge, the kind of place where folks still wave from their porches, where church bells ring on the hour, and people leave their doors unlocked during the day. I used to be a postal worker. Retired early after the stress got to me, but I still help out part-time at the library shelving returns, keeping busy. My wife Rachel teaches 2nd grade. We've been married almost 30 years. Most days we don't talk much about what happened, but we never stopped feeling it. Every March 22nd, I go to St. Jude's, quiet little stone church at the edge of town. They keep the doors open on Wednesdays. No mass, just silence. I bring the same candle every year. White votive gold cross etched on the side. No dates, no name, just the flame. This year, Tommy would have turned 17. I sat in the 4th pew like I always do. It was cool inside, still like time had folded itself up in the walls. Dust floated in the stained glass light. The smell of candle wax and wood polish mixed with something older, like books that haven't been opened in a long while. When I stood to light the candle, I felt my knees creak. Happens more often now. I placed it near the altar, same corner every year, watched it flicker to life just for a moment. Then I said it the only words I ever speak aloud in that space. Happy birthday, Tommy. The church was empty. Always is that early. Just the faint groan of a board shifting overhead, the sanctuary clock ticking like it's forgotten what time means. But this time, there was something else. 2 spots over from mine, another votive. Same design. Less burned. Hadn't been there when I walked in, I was sure of it. I leaned in. The wax had melted unevenly down the side. Embedded near the base was a small strip of paper edges curled and dark from the flame. Looked like it had been folded into the candle itself. I looked around. Still no one. Just the soft hum of that quiet building pressing against my ears. I pulled the paper free, careful not to tear it. It was still warm. Just 1 sentence in sharp black ink. He's alive. Stop looking. I stood there holding it like a live wire. I hadn't told anyone I was still searching. Not even Rachel. I sat in the car for a long time after that. The windshield fogged from my breath. March drizzle tapping soft against the glass. Rachel texted around 9 over, said coffee was ready, asked how it went. I didn't tell her about the note. I said it was quiet. Beautiful like always. I said I'd be home soon, and I meant to be. But before I pulled out of the lot, I lit the dashboard light, unfolded the message again, and read those words one more time. And that's when the feeling started. The one I hadn't felt in 10 years. The feeling that someone else was still out there. Watching. Waiting. And maybe they'd never stopped. I didn't go straight home after the candle. I drove around for a while, past the high school, the shuttered hardware store, the edge of town where the hills start rising. It was quiet out mist on the windshield trees, dark with early spring rain. The note was still in my wallet. I must have unfolded it 10 times by then. Same words, same feeling. I didn't know what it meant yet, not really. But I knew it wasn't a mistake. That note was for me. And somebody out there knew what it would do to me. Rachel was standing at the kitchen sink when I walked in, staring out the window with a dish in her hand. Coffee had just finished brewing, but she hadn't poured a cup. She turned when I stepped in. "You didn't sleep," she said. I shook my head. "Neither did you." She gave a half smile. "I always feel it more around his birthday. I try not to, but it finds its way in." I stayed near the counter, hand resting on the edge. I was tired of keeping things in. "I need to ask you something," I said. She turned, still holding the dish. "Do you remember getting anything in the mail last year? Anything strange?" She blinked. "What do you mean?" I reached into the drawer beside the fridge, the one where everything ends up receipts. Rubber bands, old pens. I pulled out the envelope she'd tucked there nearly a year ago. I'd found it by accident looking for tape. A postcard. Coastal town, gray boardwalk, group of people facing the water. No return address. Rachel's shoulders tightened the moment she saw it. "I didn't want to bring it up," she said. "It felt like I'd be inviting something back in." I studied her face. "Why didn't you tell me?" She hesitated. "Because it felt like hope. And if it wasn't real, I didn't want to do that to you again." She walked to the table and opened the envelope. The postcard had no writing on it, just the image. One of the figures on the boardwalk was a teenage boy, tall, thin, back to the camera. Hair like Tommy's. Same posture, too. I took the card, looked at it again. No stamp cancellation, which meant it was probably dropped in by hand. "There's more," I said. Rachel looked up, guarded. I told her about the trail of wax I'd found at the church leading back through the side hallway to the janitor's closet. How there was a trap door underneath. How I climbed down into a crawl space. And how I found one of Tommy's red shoes under the floor. His initials were scratched into the wall above it. She didn't speak. Her face had gone pale. "I didn't imagine it," I said. "Someone's been keeping parts of him close. Watching maybe more than that." She sat down slowly. Her hands were resting in her lap. "Do you remember Daniel?" she asked. My heart gave a jolt. "Daniel?" "From the search team," she said. "He helped with organizing volunteers, spoke at the vigil." I remembered him. Tall, clean, always dressed neat even in the rain. Something about him was polished, quietly confident. "I haven't thought about him in years," I said. Rachel looked down at her hands. "I ran into him last summer, at the farmer's market. He asked about you, about Tommy. 'Why didn't you tell me?' I asked." She breathed out. "Because he made me feel watched. Not in the way people do when they're just remembering. Like he knew something. Like he still knew something." I turned to the living room window, half expecting to see that silver sedan parked on the street again. It wasn't there. But that almost felt worse. "There's a reason someone doesn't want us looking into this," I said. "And if Daniel was close enough back then, close enough to know our routines, know that church. We need to be careful," she said. I nodded, then reached into my coat pocket. I pulled out the red shoe and handed it to her. She took it in both hands. Didn't say a word. Didn't cry. But I saw her shoulders begin to shake. That evening I called Ava. We met at her apartment just outside town, second floor walk-up. Smelled like old books and candle wax. She handed me a mug of tea and sat across from me. I remembered something else she said. From the vigil. I waited. The man, the one I told you about, he wore a pin on his lapel. Gold. Small. Looked like a lighthouse, maybe an anchor. I didn't think anything of it back then. But now, I nodded. Daniel had one of those. Non-profit pin, I think. He used to volunteer with a rescue group. Do you have a picture of him? She asked. I opened my phone, found the scanned newspaper clipping from the vigil, zoomed in on the man near the back of the crowd. Ava leaned in. Her face changed. That's him. I told her Rachel had seen him again, that we thought he might still be in town. Ava reached into a folder on the table. I printed this. It's the back of the postcard. No cancellation mark, no barcode. Which means someone dropped it into your mailbox. I felt a chill move through me. Whoever sent it knew where we lived. They're not trying to help, she said. They're trying to control what you know. Keep you just close enough to stop. Then they don't know me, I said. That night back home, Rachel placed Tommy's shoe on the mantel beside his photo. We didn't talk much after that, but something had shifted. We weren't just carrying grief anymore. We were carrying purpose. The drive to Briar's Hollow took just under 4 hours. I didn't tell Rachel I was going until I was already halfway there. She didn't argue, maybe because she knew I wouldn't turn around. Ava had traced the postcard to a local print shop in that town, a seaside spot with tourist traffic souvenir, stands salt air and fog. The boardwalk matched the photo. Same curve of railing, same sculpture near the pier. I walked slowly, comparing details on my phone. That's when I heard it. A voice, young, singing soft. Beatles tune. Golden Slumbers. I followed it. Found a boy maybe 16 or 17 sitting on a bench strumming a worn guitar. Wind in his hair. Tall. Thin. Eyes that hit something in me before I knew why. He looked up. Met my gaze. Then ran. Dropped the guitar and took off down the boardwalk past vendors across the pier gone around the corner. I chased him, legs moving slower than I wanted them to breathe catching. But I kept going, turned into the alley where he'd vanished. Empty. I searched for almost an hour, asked around. A couple vendors knew him, said he went by Lucas. Played guitar for tips. Lived in a trailer just outside of town. I found the park. Found the trailer. Blue paint peeling. A woman in a robe pointed to it. That's where the boy stays, she said. Keeps to himself. I knocked. No answer. Waited. Knocked again. Still nothing. But the curtain shifted once. Someone was in there. I wrote my name on a notepad from the glove box, left it in the door frame. Then I backed away. I didn't know yet if he was mine, but I knew someone in that town had picked that boy, chosen him, taught him that song, sent that card. Someone was trying to rewrite who he was before he could remember it himself. And the closer I got, the more I could feel it. We were not supposed to meet. The fog had thickened by the time I left the trailer park. I drove back toward the coast past shuttered shops and dark windows and parked near the boardwalk where I'd first seen the boy. I didn't expect to see him again that night, but I waited anyway. Something about the way he'd looked at me before running it wasn't panic. It was recognition, even if he didn't know from where. I sat for maybe an hour watching the lights along the pier blink on one by one. Then my phone buzzed. No name, No area code. I hesitated, then answered. For a few seconds, there was only silence. Then a voice distorted low like it had been dragged through an old tape machine. "Let him go," it said. "You're not helping anyone by digging this back up. He's safe. That's more than most get." I kept my voice even. "Who is this?" A pause. Then, "Just stop, or the next candle is yours." The line went dead. I stared at the screen for a while, thumb hovering over the call log. No number, no way to trace it. Just unknown and a timestamp. I didn't sleep much that night. At sunrise, I checked out of the motel and started the drive back home. Every mile felt slower than the last. The trees along the highway leaned toward the road, heavy with mist. When I pulled into the driveway, everything looked the same. Porch light still flickering, wind chimes moving in the breeze. But I felt it as soon as I stepped out of the car, like the air had been stirred while I was gone. Rachel was upstairs folding laundry, still in her old college sweatshirt. She didn't hear me come in. I stood there for a second, watching her through the doorway. Then I stepped into the room and told her. Not everything. Just enough. That I'd seen a boy who looked like Tommy. That someone had followed me. That the call was a threat. She sat on the edge of the bed, silent for a long time. "You need to go to the police," she said. "I did, 10 years ago, and it went nowhere. They'll take it seriously now," she said. "You have new information. You have a witness." "They'll say it's a look-alike," I told her. "They'll tell me I'm seeing what I want to see." Rachel's voice was low. "And what if you are?" I looked at her, this woman who had survived the same years I had, who still walked past Tommy's room without flinching. "Then let me be wrong," I said. "But I have to know." That night I stayed up late in the living room. The photo of the boy on the boardwalk was still open on my phone. I kept flipping back to it, studying the slope of the shoulders, the shape of the hands. He didn't look exactly like Tommy, but he looked like someone he could have become. Around 2 a.m, I stood up, stretched my legs, and walked down the hall. Tommy's room hadn't changed much. We'd packed away most of his things years ago, but a few drawings were still framed on the wall. His bookshelf was still in place, mostly empty now, except for a red toy car and a couple paperbacks he used to like. I sat in the chair by the window and pulled the red shoe from the closet shelf. I held it in my lap. The rubber sole had started to flake at the edges. The room smelled like dust and fabric softener. Across the street under the street lamp, I saw it again. The silver sedan. Engine off. Lights off. Just sitting there. I didn't move. I didn't look away. I wanted whoever was in there to see me too. The next morning I returned to St. Jude's. I parked down the block this time near the community garden just in case the car came back. The sky was low and gray again, pressing down over the roof lines. Inside the sanctuary was quiet. 2 other visitors were there. An older man in the back pew and a nun near the altar arranging lilies. I gave them a polite nod and moved toward the candles. The one with the dented base was still there, cold now. But something new caught my eye. A thin trail of wax droplets barely visible trailing down the stone floor from the candle rack toward the side hallway. I followed it, past the font toward the maintenance door. The trail stopped just outside the janitor's closet. I tried the handle. Locked. I knocked once. No answer. Then again, harder. Still nothing. I scanned the hallway and noticed a second door nearby utility room unmarked, set slightly back into the wall. I remembered it from years ago when I'd helped stack chairs during one of the vigils. I walked back through the sanctuary, circled around to the corridor near the church offices, and found it. Unlocked. Inside was what you'd expect. Mop bucket, old hymnals, metal shelves with cleaning supplies. But near the center of the room, beneath a rolled-up mat, was a square latch. Rusted. Heavy. I pulled it open. A set of narrow concrete steps led down into darkness. I hesitated, then switched on my phone's flashlight and started to descend. The air down there was thick, damp, and stale with a smell like old wood and mildew. I stepped carefully. The ground was dirt-packed unevenly. There were footprints, faint partial. Not recent, but not ancient either. They led toward the back wall where the concrete had cracked slightly at the base. I followed them. Near the far corner, half buried under a loose board, was a child's shoe. Red canvas, worn. I knelt and picked it up, hands shaking. I didn't need a label. I knew it. It was Tommy's. We'd bought them the spring before he disappeared. He'd worn them to bed that first night. Near the wall above it, scratched into the concrete by hand, were two initials, TL. I sat there for a minute, breathing in the cold air, the flashlight trembling in my grip. Then I climbed back up. In the sanctuary, the nun was still arranging flowers. I tucked the shoe into my coat and nodded to her as I passed. I didn't go home. I drove to the cemetery on the edge of town, parked near the north gate, and sat in the car. I needed time to think, to breathe. Someone had placed that shoe down there, preserved it, kept it from the elements, not discarded, kept. I called Ava, told her what I found. Her voice was quiet. "That doesn't make sense," she said. "That area was searched." "Not under the floor," I said. "Not there." "Do you think it was him?" she asked. "The man from the vigil." "I don't know," I said. "But I'm not letting it go." That night I didn't tell Rachel about the shoe, not yet. I wanted to. But something about the look in her eyes lately, I needed her to sleep. I couldn't take that from her. At 2:13 a.m., I got out of bed again, walked back to Tommy's room, sat in the chair with the red shoe in my hands. Outside, the silver sedan was back. Engine off. Lights off. Waiting. I didn't tell anyone what I found under the church. Not right away. The shoe stayed tucked in the back of the closet, wrapped in an old pillowcase. I told myself I needed time to process it, to understand what it meant. But the truth was, I wasn't ready for what might come next. I kept going through our routines like nothing had changed. Coffee in the morning, walk to the post office, shelving books at the library a few afternoons a week. But everything felt thinner, like the world was paper and I was starting to see through it. In the evenings, I'd find myself back in the garage, sitting on an overturned milk crate with the note from the church unfolded in my lap. I kept reading it over, even though the words never changed. "He's alive. Stop looking." Each time I read it, the feeling changed. First hope, then confusion, then something closer to fear. I couldn't shake the thought that someone had been watching me for longer than I realized. Not just this year, not just this month, maybe since the beginning. On the third day after I found the shoe, I pulled the old storage bin off the basement shelf. We hadn't opened it in years. Rachel had labeled it with a piece of masking tape, Tommy, age 6 to 7. I brought it upstairs and set it on the kitchen table, brushed away a few crumbs, opened the lid. Inside was a small stack of drawings, some birthday cards in a shoebox, a chipped red toy car. Beneath those, a hoodie with faded cartoon rockets along the sleeves. I held it up and remembered how much he loved space. He used to call himself Captain Tommy and pretend the living room rug was Mars. At the very bottom, beneath a fleece blanket, was the file. Not the full police file, we never got that. Just the version the department shared with us. Statements, timelines, some photos. Most of it redacted. I flipped it open and went straight to the timeline. May 17th, 2013. Dismissed from school at 2:45 p.m. Seen walking near Ashbury Street around 3:00. Rain started at 3:10. A neighbor saw a boy with a red backpack at the corner of Willow and 6th around 3:20. Rachel called the school when he didn't come home. I started looking around 3:40. Called the police by 4:15. I'd replayed that day more times than I could count. It always came back the same, too slow. Too late. I flipped through the rest of the packet and found something I hadn't paid attention to before. It was just one line in a footnote. St. Jude's held community vigil on May 21st. Volunteers accessed building through staff entrance. No cameras. Side door left unlocked for evening prayer. I stared at the sentence. Same church, same week. It hadn't occurred to me that the person who left the candle might have been involved in the original search, or at least pretended to be. That afternoon, I drove over to the church office. It's a modest brick building attached to the sanctuary. Judy, the admin, has been there forever. She greeted me with a kind smile, though there was something cautious behind it, like people were always a little unsure of what to say to me. "Been a while," she said. "You looking for something specific?" I was wondering. I said, "Do you still keep records from old community events? Vigils, that sort of thing?" She tilted her head. "How far back?" 2013. The vigil for Tommy. Her face softened. "Of course." She gestured to a metal cabinet behind the desk. "Might just be a sign-up sheet or a press clipping. You're welcome to look." I flipped through old newsletters and flyers until I found it. Community Vigil, Tommy Langley, May 21st, 2013. The volunteer list was incomplete, smudged from moisture. A few names were still readable. Rachel's, Ava S. Megan H., and at the bottom, Father John. One other name stood out, Ava Schmidt. She'd been one of Rachel's old yoga friends, younger than us, early 20s at the time. I hadn't seen her in years. "Is Ava still around?" I asked. Judy thought for a moment. "She helped with the Christmas pageant last year. I can check the contact sheet." She found a number and a partial address and handed it to me on a sticky note. "Same town, same woman." When I got home, Rachel noticed something in my face. "You're quiet," she said, handing me a bowl of soup. "More than usual." I hesitated. "Just thinking," I said. "About Tommy." She nodded. "I think about him all the time. Do you still believe he might be alive?" She didn't answer right away. "I used to," she said. "Every time there was a news story about a child found, I imagined it was him. I'd picture how he'd look now, what he'd sound like." But then I stopped. She looked down. I had to. Because hoping like that, it hurts more than grief. I stared at the table. "Do you ever wonder what we missed?" Rachel didn't look up. "Every day." The next morning I called the number Judy had given me. A tired voice picked up. "Hello, Ava, this is David Langley. Tommy's father." A pause. "Oh my God. Mr. Langley. I didn't expect. Is everything okay? I just had a question. About the vigil. About that night. Do you remember anything strange?" There was silence on the other end. Then she said I might, but I'd rather not talk over the phone. Can we meet? We met at a small coffee shop near the edge of town. Ava looked older now, hair longer, streaked with gray. Her coat hung loose around her shoulders like she hadn't been sleeping much. We sat by the window, steam fogging the glass. I always wondered what happened to him, she said. That night, at the vigil, there were people I didn't recognize, a few who weren't from the church. I leaned forward. Like who? There was a man. He showed up late, tall, business clothes like he came straight from the office. I thought he was another volunteer, but he asked a lot of questions. About you, about Tommy. Said he wanted to help. Did he give a name? No. But I remember his voice. Low, careful, not unkind, but not warm. Did anyone else notice him? Ava shook her head. He stayed near the back. I asked Father John about it once, but he said he didn't remember him either. I took a breath. Someone left a message for me last week, in the church. Said Tommy's alive. Her eyes widened, but she didn't speak. Do you think it's possible? I asked. After all this time, Ava looked down at her hands. I don't know, she said. But I think someone out there knows more than they ever said. I left the coffee shop and sat in the car for a long time. Rain started again, light but steady. I didn't drive home right away. I just sat there watching the wipers tick back and forth and thinking about that man Ava saw. The one who asked questions. The one who stayed in the shadows. And the voice on the phone that said, "He's safe. Let him go." They weren't different people. I knew that now. It was the same person. And he hadn't disappeared. He'd just been waiting for me to stop. I didn't sleep the night after meeting Ava. I lay awake listening to the quiet hum of the refrigerator downstairs and the wind tapping against the back window, thinking about that man she described. The gold pin. The questions about me. How he'd managed to disappear into the crowd like he was never there. I kept going over everything I'd missed. Not just in that week, but in the years after. I knew someone had been watching. Now I was starting to realize they may have never stopped. In the morning I got up early, poured a cup of burnt coffee Rachel had forgotten to empty, and stepped outside to let the cold air clear my head. The street was still damp from the rain. Sunlight tried to push through the clouds, but never made it past a dull gray haze. That's when my phone buzzed again. Different number. No contact saved. I picked it up on the third ring, and this time I didn't say anything first. There was a pause on the line, then the same distorted voice from before. "You're closer than you think it said, but you won't like what you find." I waited. The silence stretched. Then came a sentence that made my stomach drop. "You're looking at the wrong son." The call ended. I stood there on the porch phone, still pressed to my ear, staring out at the quiet street like it had changed shape while I was gone. I didn't know what that meant yet. I didn't understand what he was trying to tell me. But I knew it wasn't just a warning. It was a correction. I drove back to Briar's Hollow that afternoon. The postcard image still sat on the passenger seat, creased from being handled too many times. I went back to the trailer park first. The note I had left on the door was gone. Someone had taken it. I knocked again. This time a woman answered. Early 60s gray hair pulled into a low knot, calm eyes that reminded me of a school administrator or someone used to keeping order. She didn't introduce herself at first. "I'm looking for the boy," I said. "The one who sings on the boardwalk. Lucas." She didn't nod. She didn't step outside, just said, "We don't share information about the children who stay here. Not with strangers." "I'm not a stranger," I said. "I think I'm his father." She studied me for a second, then stepped out and closed the door behind her. "My name is Linda March," she said. "I've taken in runaway teens and forgotten kids for almost 15 years. Most of them don't have a name when they show up. Lucas came to me 3 years ago. Quiet, guarded. No history, no ID, no answers." "Then why are you so sure he's not my son?" I asked. "Because I know every child I've sheltered," she said. "And he doesn't remember anything before he came here." "Memory loss doesn't mean he isn't Tommy," I said. "You're talking about a boy who vanished at 7 years old. If someone took him, if someone erased who he was, he might not know what to remember." She crossed her arms. "You're projecting your grief onto someone who doesn't need it." I pulled a photo from my coat. Tommy, age 7, standing in a red jacket in front of our old shed. I held it out. "Look at this. Is that the boy who lives here?" She didn't take the photo. She looked at it. Too long. Then said, "He's not your son." I nodded slowly. "Then you won't mind if I ask him myself." "That's his choice," she said. "Not mine." I left my number again. Told her I wanted to speak to him directly. I didn't go far. I parked across the street out of sight and waited. Hours passed. Around 4 in the afternoon, I saw him. Lucas. Same build, same walk. Hood pulled up, guitar slung across his back. He headed away from the trailer, took a side road down toward the water cutting behind the small shops and empty lots until he reached a park tucked between 2 streets. He sat on a bench beneath a willow tree guitar case at his feet. I approached slowly. "Mind if I sit?" I asked. He didn't answer, but he didn't get up either. I lowered myself onto the other side of the bench. We sat in silence for a while. Then I said I talked to the woman you live with. He didn't look at me, just strummed his guitar. "She said you don't remember much from before you got there." He kept playing soft and slow. "You don't have to tell me anything I said, but if you'll let me, I'd like to show you something." I reached into my coat and pulled out the red shoe, the one I'd found under the church. I held it in my lap, angled slightly so he could see. "This was yours," I said. "You wore it almost every day the year you disappeared." He paused. His hand stilled on the strings. Then he said, barely audible, "I used to have a dog. Brown ears. Name started with an S." My throat tightened. "Sammy," I said. "You used to feed him grapes when we weren't looking." He didn't respond, but he didn't deny it either. I pulled out the photo, held it up. "You don't have to recognize this. You don't have to remember me. But I think you're my son, and if I'm right, I don't want you to be alone anymore." His shoulders rose and fell. Then he looked out at the water. "I don't know who I am," he said, "but I don't feel like anyone." I nodded slowly. "You don't have to feel like anyone right now. But I want to find out the truth. And if you're willing, we can do that together." He didn't answer right away. Then he gave a small nod. That night we drove 30 miles inland to a clinic that handled private DNA testing. Clean office, 2 chairs. A nurse who didn't ask questions. We both gave samples. They told us the results would take about a week. Back at the motel, I sat on the edge of the bed and texted Ava to let her know what had happened. A few minutes later, she replied, "You need to come home. Something's happened." Before I could ask what she meant, another message came through, this one from the same unknown number. "You've gone too far." Attached was a photo. Rachel, standing in our living room, shot through the window from outside the house, not from across the street, from the sidewalk. I drove the whole way back in silence, the kind that fills your ears until you forget what the world sounds like. The message from Ava was still on my phone. So was the photo, the one of Rachel taken through our living room window. Not from a distance, close enough to make out the pattern on the kitchen curtain behind her. I didn't call her. I didn't want to scare her before I knew what I was walking into. The sun had started to set by the time I pulled into our street. The sky was washed out pale blue, fading into ash. A light was on in the front room, just one. No movement behind the curtains. I turned the engine off and waited. After a minute, I stepped out and crossed the lawn. Didn't bother with the porch light. The front door creaked when it opened. I found Rachel in the kitchen, bent over the sink. She looked up when I came in, surprised, but not alarmed. "I thought you were staying the night," she said. I changed my mind. She studied my face. "Something happened?" I hesitated. "I need to check the house." She frowned. "Why, I just need to." She didn't stop me. I moved room to room, slow and methodical. Living room, den, back hallway. I checked the locks, the windows, the basement door. Everything looked untouched. But I could feel it. Something in the air, like the charge right before a storm. Upstairs, the guest room door was closed. We hadn't used that room in years. I opened it gently. The window was unlatched, just slightly. The curtain fluttered against the sill like it had caught its breath and was holding it. I relocked it and pulled the shade. Back downstairs, Rachel was waiting at the foot of the steps. "You want to tell me what's going on?" I showed her the photo. Watched her face shift, then still. "Where did this come from?" she asked. "Same number, same man. He's watching the house now." Rachel sat down at the kitchen table and held her head in her hands. "He used to call," she said quietly. "What, after the first year? Every few months? Never left a name. Just said he had eyes on Tommy. That he was safe. I thought it was someone cruel playing with us. Why didn't you tell me?" "Because it never led anywhere," she said. "Because I didn't want to give you hope for nothing." I didn't answer. That night I called Ava. She said she didn't know who left the message, only that it had been slipped under her front door in an unmarked envelope, a single sheet of paper. No writing, just a printed image, the side of a building half in shadow. She texted me a photo of it. It wasn't familiar at first. Just brickwork, a drain pipe, and a narrow slice of an alley. Then I saw the rusted sign hanging off the edge, worn letters that read, "Westburn Technical Storage." I hadn't been there in years. It used to be a cold storage facility near the train yard, shut down sometime in the early 2000s. Kids used to dare each other to sneak inside. There were rumors, always rumors, about what went on there before it closed. I didn't tell Rachel where I was going. I told her I was headed to the library to file a report. I left a note under her mug in case I didn't come back. The storage facility sat at the end of a dead road just past the old industrial corridor. Weeds had split through the asphalt, and the metal fence sagged in places like it had given up trying to keep people out. I parked 2 blocks away and walked the rest. It was past midnight. No streetlights, just a distant hum from the highway and the sharp crack of gravel under my boots. The door on the south side had been jimmied open. Someone had wedged it with a piece of pipe to keep it from swinging shut. Inside it smelled like rust and damp concrete. I moved slow. My flashlight beam swept across piles of broken shelving, water-stained walls, old equipment covered in tarps. I followed the interior hallway to the back where the cold lockers used to be. That part of the building had collapsed partially ceiling beams, bent like they'd been pried apart. I stepped around the debris and found a small service stairwell leading down. The air got colder the further I went. At the bottom was a narrow hallway, lined with storage cages. Most were empty, except for one. Its gate was open. Inside were child-sized clothes, neatly folded, shoes lined along one edge. On the floor, a mattress, worn but not rotted. On the wall, drawings, crude, scribbled in colored pencil. Stars, a rocket ship, a dog with floppy ears, and one more folded and taped to the wall like someone didn't want it seen. I peeled it back carefully. It was a family. Stick figures, a tall man, a woman, a boy, all holding hands. The boy was in red. Behind them was a shadow, larger, separate, eyes drawn in black ink, watching. I stepped back, heart pounding. Then I heard it. A sound behind me, small metallic, like a lock being turned. I spun around. The door at the top of the stairs had closed, and I wasn't alone down there. The moment I heard that door click shut behind me, I knew I wouldn't be getting back out the way I came. I didn't rush to check it. I just stood there, flashlight still trained on that wall of drawings, and waited. My ears strained for movement, footsteps breathing the scrape of metal, but there was nothing. Just the thick, stale air pressing in and the faint creak of something shifting overhead. When I finally turned and made my way back toward the stairwell, I tested the door handle. It didn't budge. From the outside, it had been rigged to latch shut. I put a hand flat against the metal and leaned into it, but it didn't move. That door wasn't just stuck. It was locked. I turned back toward the dark hallway. My beam caught a flicker of something deeper down, farther than I'd gone before. There was another corridor tucked behind the first narrower, lower ceiling. This part of the building wasn't on any original blueprint. I stepped into it, the floor gritty under my boots, and followed the angle as it sloped slightly downward. 10 feet and the temperature dropped. My breath fogged out in front of me. Then the air changed less like a basement, more like a cave. Dry, hollow. At the end of the passage was a door. Wood, painted black, badly chipped around the handle. The number 4 had been burned into it rough and uneven like it had been done by hand. I hesitated, then reached for the latch. It opened without a sound. Inside was a windowless room, maybe 12 by 12 feet. Concrete floor. Fluorescent light buzzing from a unit wired into the ceiling. Against the wall sat a filing cabinet, dented and rust-streaked. Next to it, a fold-out table with a chair, both clean. Too clean, as if someone had been using them recently. On the table was a binder. It was black, cracked along the spine. No label. I opened it slowly. Inside were photos, some printed, some Polaroids. All of children. Ages maybe 5 to 10. Some candid, some posed like school portraits. Each page was labeled with a first name, a date, and a single word recovered missing, unverified. I turned the pages one by one until I saw him. Tommy. Not the school picture. Not the one we'd given the police. This was a photo I'd never seen before. He looked about 8, older than when we lost him. Different haircut. Same eyes. Same jawline. He was sitting on a bunk bed staring directly at the camera, and underneath his name was a word I didn't understand at first. Converted. I flipped back. One girl's page said pending. Another boy's said discarded. My stomach turned. The binder ended with a final sheet of paper typed stapled. It was a list. Dates, locations, initials. Some of the entries were redacted, but one stood out. March 22nd, 2012. That was Tommy's abduction date. His initials were there, but next to it under handler was a name I hadn't heard before, just a code name, Dagger. Then I heard it. Footsteps, deliberate, coming from the hallway. I closed the binder and backed into the corner of the room, light still on, heart hammering so hard I could hear it behind my eyes. A shadow passed the doorway. Then a voice. Calm. Familiar. You should have stayed gone. I stepped forward. Who are you? He didn't answer right away. Just stood there, half in the shadows. Then he said, You really don't remember me, do you? I recognized the voice. It wasn't distorted now. It was clear. Flat. Mr. Kent, I said. He stepped into the light. Kent had been Tommy's third-grade math teacher. Retired the year after Tommy vanished. Nobody had questioned it. He was quiet, kept to himself. Wore corduroy jackets, always parked in the back lot. Nothing ever stuck out. He looked different now. Heavier. Slower. But the eyes were the same pale blue, never blinking. You ran that youth camp upstate, I said. The one they shut down in '09. He nodded. You should have stopped digging. Where's my son? He doesn't know you, Kent said. He doesn't remember you. We made sure of that. I felt the weight of the red shoe in my coat pocket. I found the room I said. The drawings. The mattress. You kept him here. He tilted his head. I didn't keep them. I processed them. There's a difference. I stepped closer. What do you mean processed? There's a system, he said. We take what no one's watching. We break them down. We rebuild what's useful. What's not gets buried. He stepped forward and closed the door behind him. You weren't supposed to find this place, he said. No one was. You got lucky. I reached into my coat and hit the button on my phone. I'd been recording since the moment I heard the footsteps. You're going to confess, I said. He smiled. No, David. I'm going to make sure you disappear just like he did. That's when the sound came from the stairwell. A door slamming open. Boots. Shouts. Kent turned, startled. Then I heard Ava's voice yelling down. David, are you down there? Kent reached into his coat. I didn't think. I lunged. We crashed into the table, the binder skidding across the floor. His hand hit the ground first, and I pinned it with my knee until I felt something snap. He screamed loud and guttural. By the time Ava reached us, flashlight in hand, I had his other arm behind his back. He's the one I said. He took Tommy. She looked around the room at the photos scattered across the floor and nodded once. "I already called it in," she said. "They're on their way." I didn't speak again until the officers arrived. When they did, I handed over the phone, the binder, everything. I watched them cuff Kent and walk him out into the night. As they loaded him into the back of the cruiser, he turned and looked straight at me. And he smiled, like he knew something I didn't. They kept Kent in holding for 3 days before the federal task force arrived. Ava and I were both called in to give statements, mine about the binder, the room, the recordings, hers about the photo, the tip-off. By then, the evidence was enough for a search warrant. The cold storage facility was cordoned off, sealed, and excavated inch by inch. What they found under the subfloor changed everything. 4 shallow trenches lined with rotted mattress padding and bits of cloth. Human remains in various stages of decomposition. None recent. Some decades old. But one of them they confirmed belonged to a boy who'd vanished from Kansas in 2009. Another matched a missing child from North Carolina reported in 2014. There was no sign of Tommy. Kent refused to speak for the first 2 weeks of questioning. No attorney. No confession, just silence. His prints had been found on the binder and the table, and a handwriting analyst confirmed the labels were a match. But legally, they needed more to pin any individual disappearance on him. The room wasn't enough. The files weren't enough. And Kent knew it. That's when Ava brought up the name. Dagger. The code name listed next to Tommy's initials in the binder. The Bureau ran it through their system and found a match tied to an old investigation into a foster network in Arizona shut down years ago for financial fraud, but never criminally pursued beyond that. The name Dagger had come up once in a sealed deposition by a former caseworker. I asked if that caseworker was still alive. She was. We flew out that weekend, me, Ava, and a state liaison. Her name was Leanne Carter. She'd been in her 20s when she testified, now living under a different name in Nevada. She didn't want to talk at first. Said she'd left that world behind. Said she couldn't sleep for years after what she saw. But when I showed her Tommy's photo, the one from the binder, she froze. "I remember him," she said. She described a facility in the desert, not a group home, not a foster center. Something in between. She called it a transitional site, a place where boys were moved through, reconditioned, given new names, taught new behaviors. Some stayed for months, she said. Some were gone in days. She remembered Kent, not by name, but by his shoes. Always leather, always polished. But he never looked anyone in the eye. Leanne agreed to give a sworn statement naming Kent as one of the handlers. That, combined with the evidence from the cold storage site and Ava's recordings, was enough to bring formal charges. Child trafficking, unlawful detainment, interstate endangerment. Kent's trial was set for the following spring. The courtroom was small, windowless, just rows of chairs and a judge who looked exhausted before proceedings even began. I sat in the back. Rachel couldn't bring herself to come. She said she couldn't look at him again. I didn't blame her. Kent didn't testify, didn't speak. His lawyer claimed he was mentally unfit, that his history of neurological deterioration made him unreliable, a scapegoat for a system far larger than him. But the binder said otherwise. So did the bones under that floor. The prosecution laid out the timeline, the recovered names, the history of facilities with missing reports tied back to Kent's last known addresses. When they played my audio recording, no one made a sound. Not during his words. Not during mine. They found him guilty on 5 counts. He was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. It didn't feel like victory. After the trial, one of the agents pulled me aside. He said something had come through. A tip connected to the word converted. A teenager had turned up at a youth center in Oklahoma under a different name. No memory of his life before age 9. Brown hair, right age. The photo showed a scar above his eyebrow, same place Tommy had one as a kid. I flew out the next day. He was taller than I imagined, broader, wore a threadbare hoodie and spoke with careful, measured words. They said he'd been quiet since arriving, kept to himself, but he was kind, polite. When I sat down across from him, he looked at me without recognition. "I'm David," I said. "I think you might be my son." He blinked, then looked away. "I don't remember," he said softly. I showed him a photo, me, Rachel, and Tommy at the lake one summer before the disappearance. He stared at it for a long time. Then he handed it back. "I don't know them," he said. "I'm sorry." I nodded. "It's okay," I said. We sat there for a while. Just silence. Later, one of the counselors told me that trauma can fracture memory so deeply it never heals, that sometimes the mind builds an entirely new life just to survive. They couldn't confirm with certainty that it was Tommy. DNA was still pending, but I didn't press it. I left my number, told them to call if he ever wanted to talk. On the flight home, I looked out the window the whole way. The sky was pale, quiet, and for the first time in a long while I felt the weight shift just a little. Not gone, but moving. I still go by the old house sometimes. Not to stop, just to see it. The porch light's always off now, and the hedges have grown wild along the side. There's no one watching from the window, no shapes in the dark, just quiet. Sometimes too quiet. After the trial, Rachel and I took some space. Nothing dramatic, no fights or final words, just a slow drift that felt inevitable. We'd carried so much for so long, and once the weight shifted, neither of us quite knew what to do with the space it left. She moved closer to her sister's place in Oregon. I stayed behind. We still talk birthdays, holidays, that sort of thing, but the rhythm we once had is gone. Some things don't come back. As for Tommy, the DNA came back inconclusive. The sample had degraded too far over the years. They said it was unlikely we'd get a clear match unless Tommy himself, if he's alive, submitted his own. I never told Rachel that. I figured she had enough to carry. The boy in Oklahoma, he moved to a foster home out of state. He changed his name again. I sent him a letter through the center. Never heard back. And I don't expect to. Sometimes I wonder if the mind just protects what it can. Seals the worst of it behind some door we were never meant to open. But doors don't stay shut forever. They shift. They leak. And if you're quiet enough, sometimes you hear the truth breathing just on the other side. Kent died in prison last month. Stroke, they said. No visitors, no funeral, just a line in the paper. The case files were sealed after sentencing, but Ava said there's a push to reopen some of the older cases. Now names and codes from that binder that were never matched to real children. She's still working them slow and steady, even if most people have moved on. That's who she is. She doesn't let go easy. As for me, I've stopped looking for the next sign, the next shadow. There comes a point where you accept that answers don't always come with peace. Sometimes they just land hard and unfinished and you live around them. But I remember every detail, every year. The hollow of the hallway, the scratch on the back door, the sound of the phone when it didn't ring. And I think maybe that's the real shape justice takes. Not a verdict or a sentence, but the act of remembering, of refusing to forget the child who never made it home. The one whose drawings lived longer than his name. If you stayed with me through this story, thank you. For listening. For remembering him too. And if it moved something in you, share it. Let it live a little longer out in the open, so no name gets left behind.